It's my pleasure to be with you today as I talk about the future of parks and philanthropy. As she shared, I am the chair of NEPF, and my former role, I was the executive director of Illinois Park and Recreation Association for 9 years from 2012 to 2021. And so that is how I found myself serving in the wonderful community of Parks and Recreation. Although my career, I've been in the nonprofit membership side of nonprofits since 2001. So even as a consultant today, I work in nonprofit membership organizations. And so all of us who are on this call today certainly have a passion for parks. We know that parks bring communities together. And certainly that for me is what always drove my day-to-day work when I got the pleasure of working in Parks and Recreation for 9 years. The benefits that parks have, that they bring individuals and families together to make memories every day. And so often we see that in parks, people celebrate those important moments of their lives, celebrate events, and all of those cultural celebrations. I know where I live, 4th of July events are huge in parks, sometimes sporting events, educational events. For me, I live a block from a huge park in my community. And last night there were cars just lined up down the street and around the corner from that park because they were hosting a big community sharing event there. And so everyone in my community knows that if you want to really engage in the community, you do that through our local park. And so for me, it is just a great pleasure that every time I pull out of my street, no matter what direction I'm going in, I pass a huge, beautiful park. And philanthropy and parks have this wonderful intersection, as again, I know all of you know, as we come together in local park foundations. And philanthropy is this lifeline for local parks. So it allows us through philanthropy to really add capacity for our local parks. And so add capacity to all of the wonderful things that our local parks and green spaces, I heard that version loud and clear, for all of the things that our local parks and green spaces can do. And so we get to add capacity through philanthropy. We get to collaborate with our local parks and green spaces and connect them with private funders and public institutions and philanthropic champions. And through the foundations, through the philanthropy, we get to build public awareness about our local parks. And we get to add community engagement. We get to bring donors to our local parks, and we get to add value for these local parks. And there's so much good that comes from that. And so I thought I'd share some trends in philanthropy. So certainly we're all aware that different generations act differently as donors. And so this creates some important trends in giving. We know that Gen Y and Gen Z in particular are very driven as donors, that they want to see the impact of their donations. I teach ethics as part of my role as a consultant, and the official term for this, by the way, is ethical consumerism, right? And so it's the behavior that people want to support brands and give funding as donors to corporations and foundations that share their values, right? And so impact-driven giving is how we see ethical consumerism play out on the foundation side. But again, we know Gen Y and Gen Z want to know that when they donate to a foundation, they want to know that their funds are not just going to keeping the lights on, but are going to something that will make a meaningful change and difference. And so we as foundations have to be able to show in a meaningful way that your donations made an impact in our local parks and green spaces. We also see as a trend this equity focus in philanthropy. So shifts towards addressing some historic inequities. So we know that that a benefit of parks is related to how close is that park? How easy is it for everyone in the community to be able to access that park or that park and rec agency or that green space? How close is it? Makes a huge difference to whether or not people in the community will access it. And so this equity focus of, is that park accessible to everyone in the community? We know that there's this close tie. And so now philanthropy is connecting to these historic inequities, this access to parks and green spaces. And so now there's this opportunity to connect philanthropic giving to fix some of these historic inequities, and to connect green spaces across communities to ensure everyone has access. So I think that is fantastic. I believe that there will be more and more grants helping philanthropic organizations connect these pieces together. We also know with the constant rise of social media through platforms like TikTok that we can connect our donors to our parks and green spaces in ways that we've never been able to do before. And so that allows us to really show our donors, as well as our corporate partners and our local institutions, to be able to show them all the things that we're raising money for and how it will make a meaningful difference, tying it back to that impact-driven giving, so that we can make videos and we can engage with young donors, all the different ways that we're trying to just really make a difference in the community. And how, I see a question in the chat. And yes, they started a question, said, okay, you just answered that. And to show how we can connect their donor intent with all of the great things that we're trying to do for their communities. Some additional trends, though: technology and customization. So we know, I'm going to talk about trends in parks here in a second. We know that technology, AI, all of these things are trends in parks, as well as trends in philanthropy. But related to that, the use of technology in parks is showing us so much more about our park participant behavior than we've ever seen before. Likewise, it is showing us so much more about our donor behavior than we've ever had access to before. And that is allowing us to customize our messaging to donors and prospective donors in ways that we've never been able to do before. So now that we know what is it that our donors are really individually interested in, now we can customize our messaging to them to really engage our donors, to be able to say to them, we believe, for example, that you as a donor are really interested in something like helping us to develop a playground in a local part of our park where there's a great need. And now we can put, through social media, messaging about building a playground, and we can put that message in social media on a mom's group in the community, right? We can make this messaging very, very custom so that we can connect donor intent with our needs in the community and really get a final accomplishment in our community very, very quickly. I'm excited about those types of opportunities. When I was in Illinois Park and Recreation Association, we had a grant program that allowed us to put playgrounds out across our state. We placed at least 100 of them. And, that was one of my favorite parts of the job, is being able to have that kind of impact in our local communities. I loved that. Additionally, as trends in philanthropy, collaborative funding models. There is, across the board, as a trend in nonprofits, a drastic increase in the competitive market. So we know that nonprofits are seeing competition in ways that they have never seen before. Groups that used to be their partners are now their competitors. But if we can accept that as fact and go back to saying, okay, we know that you are competing with us, but let's go back to partnering anyway, partner again, and say, let's now pool our resources. Let's intentionally partner with corporations and other nonprofits and other foundations and pool our resources, expand our staff and volunteer capacity, share our expertise, so that we can have a greater impact to solve some of the needs in our communities. We will be ultimately incredibly successful in supporting our communities in ways that we never have before. So I love that opportunity for local park foundations and green spaces. I also want to just acknowledge, I know all of us know this, but the economic impact of parks across our country is to me, it's just exciting, right? There's so much that our parks can do for all of our local communities. It's the way that our local parks just boost those local economies through tourism, through sporting events, through all of those holiday celebrations, especially over the summer months. And they increase property values, they support local businesses, and they reduce healthcare costs. And so for me, when I think of all the good that parks are doing in our local communities across the country, they make these local communities the end all be all best place to live and work. When I look at that, to me, I think about, so how can these local park foundations and green spaces, how can they support these local parks in doing even more for our local communities? How can these foundations do even more to boost local economies, to increase property values, to reduce healthcare costs, to make these local communities a better place to live and work? And if you can make that connection, that's where I think donors will come out even more. And so again, looking at trends in parks, there's more technology. We've talked about that. There's climate challenges. And as climate challenges happen, where I live in Illinois, there's tornadoes, there's floods, but parks are oftentimes part of the solution to those challenges. There's green infrastructure, there's flood retention. So even though there's still tough weather, the parks are there to help protect the communities from some of those challenges. So when we place our local parks as the solution, it should become even easier to support funding for these open green spaces and for some of the benefits to our communities that parks offer. And conservation, there's more and more things happening in local parks around conservation. And if the foundation side can leverage that and connect that to some of the donor intent, especially of Gen Y, Gen Z, I think there's huge opportunities for foundations there. On the health and wellness side, we know that the US Surgeon General has dubbed this era the loneliness epidemic, that it started during the 2020 COVID shutdowns, and in fact has only gotten worse. And so now we know that there is this epidemic of loneliness, and the solution we know is in part the way that parks bring people together. So again, what can foundations for local parks do to leverage the solution that we have in our own backyards to bring people together in local parks and to help solve the loneliness epidemic? What can foundations do to leverage that local solution in our own backyards? And what about inclusion and belonging through things like universal design of playground equipment for individuals and families who have a person or more with disabilities? What about cultural representation? Can foundations do things like getting a community who has some wonderful representation of cultural related art and bring that into a park and do some funding to support that effort, and now maybe see more engagement in their community of that diverse representation? Can it be the foundation who is bringing that engagement and that representation into that space? And what about access and affordability? Can it be the foundation who is raising funds to make programming in the parks more accessible? Right? To me, all of these trends in parks show opportunities for the foundation to make that park even more a part of the community. And so again, I see that the foundations are the solution for all things at the local park level. They can again be a part of upgrading facilities for advanced innovation, for more partnerships with local government. There are challenges coming, we know that. There are likely to be more climate challenges, and that can create more costs for local park agencies. Again, where I live, sometimes the tornadoes will wipe out all the trees on a park. Certainly there are costs to that. We know that there are economic uncertainties. We know that in prior times where there have been economic challenges, sometimes a local park agency will lose a significant amount of their funding, which again are a challenge that a local foundation can be a part of solving. And we know that engaging that next generation to change the way we communicate with Gen Y and Gen Z as donors, to help connect with them to bring them back into their local park, as donors, as participants, as an engaged part of that local park. So again, as we look out into the future, I hope that local park foundations see our parks as the hub of the community where we can be really focused on advancing our communities through inclusivity and belonging, thinking about that loneliness epidemic and the way that our parks are the solution. To really embrace innovation and technology and to use that as a way to customize messaging for donors and to build cross-sector and generational coalitions, really bring people together in every way that we can and to bring them together through our local parks. And so with that, I just hope that we can continue to support our local parks and our local park foundations across the country and green spaces. I heard you. And so if there's ever anything that I can do to support any of you or your local parks and local foundations, this is my email address. Please feel free to reach out to me anytime. But I do just want to thank all of you who are members of NAPF. This is a member-only event, so you are all members. So I just want to thank you for your membership in NAPF. And as chair of the board, I do just want to say thank you so much for all of your engagement.